Hi, everyone, and welcome to Nature Connects. Nature Connects is Massachusetts TNC webinar series that connects you with scientists, experts, and influencers from New England and around the world. Thanks so much for joining us today. I'm Deb Markowitz, the State Director of the Nature Conservancy in Massachusetts, and your host. Today, we're going to be talking with Karen Mauney-Brodek. She's the president of the Emerald Necklace Conservancy. The Emerald Necklace Conservancy protects and stewards 1,100 acres of precious parkland extending from Boston's Back Bay through Brookline and from Jamaica Plain to Franklin Park in Dorchester. The Conservancy works to make green spaces available to all. Karen will be telling us about how the Conservancy maintains and restores this important area of land. She'll also share how the global pandemic has impacted the Conservancy's efforts. And after her presentation, Karen will take your questions. As you think of questions for Karen, please enter them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. And thanks again for joining us today. Welcome, Karen. And I have to say personally, I'm in Brookline. That's where before the pandemic, I spent a bunch of my time and I used the Emerald Necklace all the time. In fact, I would sometimes bike all the way to work downtown almost entirely on the Emerald Necklace. So thank you so much for the service you provide to the people of Boston and the area.
Oh, that's wonderful. Not just a user, but a customer. Fantastic.
Yes.
Oh no, that's great. I'm so happy to be here. I'm really honored to be here with the Nature Conservancy. The Nature Conservancy is an organization that I've been following since I was a wee parkie at the age of 21 with my first job at the New York City Parks Department. And I felt like I had joined the team then, and I'm really glad to have been on it this whole time. So,
Well, I can't believe it's taken us this long to meet each other since we're in each other's fan clubs.
I know, it's a little strange, but
Well, we're here now.
Silver linings of the pandemic that we're meeting more people virtually in this format.
That's great. So I understand you've got a PowerPoint. Why don't you tell us all about all about.
So I can go ahead and maybe I'll start sharing my screen. Is that okay? Great. So so I thank you so much, Deb, for having me. This has been really wonderful. I'm going to take a little time to just sort of talk to you about what the Emerald Necklace is, what the Emerald Necklace Conservancy is. So many of you probably know so much about this because you're park lovers. I feel like this is the Parthenon of parks. No offense to all the other parks out there, of course. I grew up down the street from an Olmsted Park in Atlanta, Georgia. And I've had the great pleasure of working for the New York City Parks Department and the San Francisco Parks Department. And now I get to be here as the president of the Emerald Necklace Conservancy and steward this amazing system. And it's a real honor. So the Emerald Necklace, which we consider, it has so many purposes, but I'm going to talk about a few of them today. It's a park system. It's a flood prevention system and also a connector, and so important for our health these days. I'm going to again talk big picture about what the Emerald Necklace is. I'm going to talk a little bit about how we have been flexing and adapting to serve all of the users that have always been in the parks, but then now we're seeing even more users in the park because of the pandemic. Talk a little bit about some of the major projects that we're working on, and then leave time for questions. That is the goal. So just to ground everyone, many of you, I'm sure, are fans of Frederick Law Olmsted, and we like to tout the fact that the Emerald Necklace was, America's first linear park system that he designed. Central Park is fantastic. All of these projects he worked on are wonderful, but what I think is really special about the Emerald Necklace is it was a linear system, and also it's a piece of green infrastructure. So in the 1880s, he was doing what we're all sort of coming back to now, and Boston has benefited from this tremendously over the decades, perhaps in a way that's a little underappreciated. So I'm very excited so this is a system that looks so natural, but in fact is, as many of you know, constructed and has to be taken care of. So here we go. This is the modern map, so it hasn't changed a lot, but there have been some changes and some areas that we have to work to both restore, steward, and also adapt because there have been changes. We have the automobile, which has really changed the nature of aspects of the system, and we have different types of pollution and other challenges. So this is the system that we steward. To tell you a little bit about what we do, again, the Emerald Necklace is 5 miles long. It's from Charles Gate to Franklin Park, over 1,100 acres. It has, all these distinct parks, but they're all connected. One thing that I really think of as a goal is to really remind people how they are connected and they can use the parks as part of their daily, their daily commute. Deb, it's great to hear that you were doing that. I think some people know how to do that. Some people maybe need to be introduced that this could be possible. So I think that's something we're going to be doing more and more over time, trying to make that safer and more accessible to more people at different levels of walking or biking or wheelchair maneuvering. And we work with a lot of public partners. So, the Emerald Necklace Conservancy doesn't own the land, everyone does, the public does, and it's stewarded by, it's managed mainly a lot of the day-to-day by the 3, official property owners, which is the city of Boston, the town of Brookline, and DCR. And what we do is we support them, we bring them together, and we help them accomplish many of their goals. Because what we all know, I think, is that parkland a lot of times takes more than what what the government is able to or willing to at this point spend on it. So this is a constant evolving challenge, and so we partner to try and make, as I have a board member who says, we try and make 1 + 1 = 5. So, here's just a little bit of the landscape. So because of sort of the history of how the parks developed and the brilliance of Olmsted, there are 3+ parties really responsible for pieces of the system. And so we try to bring them all together and say, well, let's think about all of the trees as one. Let's think about how, the water that runs from this park to this park, how do these things work together? And, a lot of that can happen between some of the public partners on their own, but a lot of times, I worked in the public sector until I got this exciting job, and people don't always make the time or have the time to have those conversations or the resources to really sit down and think about partnerships. So that's a place that I think we can really, and we have thrived, and it's been part of what makes us who we are. So here's some of the pictures of what we are thrilled to support with a lot of the programs that I'll talk about later. But I definitely also want to talk about how these amazing parks have been essential to the well-being of the public during the pandemic. I'll talk about that in a minute. Again, we were founded in 1998, and we provide landscape maintenance, tree care. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Free programs. We have a visitor center. There's a little picture of it here in the middle, where about 2 years ago we added displays that tell the history of the park, because a lot of times I do meet people in Boston and they may be even standing in the Emerald Necklace. They don't always know that it's the Emerald Necklace. They think of it as Jamaica Pond or Franklin Park or a piece. They don't know it's all one thing. And I think sometimes that's because Olmsted and his genius made this very naturalistic system that people think is natural. And so how do we don't want to make something not naturalistic. We don't want to make something that looks artificial, but we also want to remind people this needs your support. You have to care about it, and it's important because you take care of it and it takes care of us. And we are supported entirely by donations, by supporters, individuals, foundations, and that really is how we are able to do this work. And thank you to all of you that may be supporters and the supporters out there. It's really been fantastic. We've only been around for 20 years, and I think there's more to come. So one of the main values that I think the Conservancy works with is really connecting all of our neighborhoods. So up and down the Emerald Necklace, which spans, over 14 neighborhoods, we bring together a board of advisors. So all of the park groups and many of the community associations, the CDCs, the zoo, the Museum of Fine Arts, all of our partners up and down the necklace we try to bring together, and we have quarterly meetings with all of them, and then individual committee meetings where we talk about how to improve access, how to improve maintenance, and we work hand in hand with them to focus on what should be the priorities of the things we work on. And it's tremendous. We get a tremendous amount of energy, support, and amazing volunteers through these relationships. I mean, that's really how the organization was born. This is just some pictures of the kind of work we do. So we have free tours. We, in non-pandemic times, we work with youth outdoors. A lot of the time with our green team, we have a summer and a spring program where we work with students primarily from the Boston Public Schools that, maybe have had some experience in the outdoors, but maybe haven't. These are paid positions. So we're sort of trying to develop the new generation of environmental stewards. We do a tremendous amount of tree work. And sometimes we also just want to have some fun and remind people how to enjoy the necklace. And for the Conservancy's 20th anniversary, I'm very, very proud of the exhibit that we put on a couple of years ago. Some of you may have heard about it, but maybe Nico will pop it in the chat so you guys can see the link. It's called Fog by Flow, and we had these fog sculptures, and it was really fun. It was one of the most fun things I've ever done. It wasn't easy, but it was one of the most fun things I've ever done. So changing topics a little bit, how can these parks respond to the needs of the community now as we are in the pandemic? Starting last spring, it was definitely a huge change to think about the fact that people were being told not to go outside. They didn't know if it was safe to go outside immediately, but over time they said actually being outdoors was good and safe as long as you could be spaced, as long as you could have a face covering or a mask and be properly spaced. So we pretty quickly, the city of Boston, for example, was really focusing on trying to make sure that food and meals got to students that were normally in school and getting meals. And they shifted, to do those things. I was very excited. The Conservancy was able to say, can we make signs? Can we put signs out there and sort of help? Because that was one thing we could do. So we pretty quickly designed signs and other information to immediately tell people, here's how to be safe. So not only could people feel like they could be safe in the park, but they also felt like other users in the park would know how to be safe. And so they felt like that was being communicated. So this is one thing that we were able to do. I think I got approval for those signs in 48 hours for the design of them and the logos and those kind of things. It usually takes me, a few commission meetings and months to do. So that was fantastic. It was really great to see how everyone kind of came together to respond quickly. We have a mobile tour guide that has gotten much more use. It was always getting used, but it's getting, the usage has gone way up during the pandemic. So more people are trying to find out what they can do. We noticed that our map that I showed you earlier had been downloaded from the website many more times than before. And we've been shifting what we can to a virtual program. And what we're finding is actually a lot of people do want to learn more about the park and can join virtually, maybe even more than they could in person. So it's been very interesting. We've had a few different webinars, much like this. We've partnered with the Leventhal Map Center and other local institutions. So that's been really great and frankly gratifying to feel like we can support all of the park users right now. We have really been lucky that a lot of folks continue to really understand the importance of parks. And so we have been able to continue at our same staffing level, provide a lot of our same programs, and just shift them. And so that has just been tremendous that we felt like we could still be here for people. And it's also, I think, been really gratifying for a lot of our supporters to know that we are here today because of their investment in us and what we're doing, so that we were able to respond so quickly and do what we can to not only support the parks, but also, we did like something small, like we provided Dunkin' Donut gift cards to all of the park essential employees that have all been working throughout this. They're considered essential. They've been in the parks every day, day in and day out, taking care of the parks, taking out the garbage. And so these were all ways that I think that, we really wanted to be there for the people that are helping us with the parks too. We've done a tremendous amount of tree work during the pandemic. So I'll talk about that a little later, because a lot of our maintenance work was able to continue. And in fact, in some ways, we felt pretty great that we were able to be one of the, main employers. We were able to keep working without slowing down and keep, a lot of folks employed. during, what is not only a pandemic, but a systematic a crisis of systematic racism and an economic crisis all at the same time. So here's just some examples of the signage. We've been really trying to provide information with QR codes for people that can, use their phones to find out more. Try to keep the signs pretty simple, but we also at times really do want to have multiple languages, or just try and communicate as much as we can graphically, so it doesn't really matter what language you speak potentially. So you can see all the signs that we've, the different types of signs that we've had out. We also were noticing during the pandemic, because more people were using the parks, some people were actually even eating in the parks more, and there was an increase in garbage. So we've been trying to remind people to be a park hero, leave zero. This is a phrase that I think is used quite frequently, but remind people to take their garbage with them. And that's something that definitely our park partners have really struggled with. A lot of times organizations are moving away from garbage cans to try and, garbage is a huge expense for most municipalities and parks departments. And if people can take home their own garbage, it saves everyone, the taxpayers and others, money. And then maybe they can spend that on trees and plants and taking care of the park and fixing the playground, things like that. Right when this started, I started having a biweekly call with the Park Patrol and the City of Boston and the town of Brookline, and the Arboretum and other sort of partners, so we could talk about where we were seeing crowding, if we were seeing crowding, or where were we going to be limiting parking, because we were trying to shift people around. One of the, I think, most important things that we did during the pandemic was just remind people the Emerald Necklace is 1,100 acres, and some people know about certain parks because they're really well loved, perhaps overloved, but there are other areas too, and really just ask everyone to spread out, that there are, so I think there's a note on here, there's 1,100 acres spread out, get to know some other areas. So we've been really trying to communicate that not everyone needs to go to Jamaica Pond or the Arboretum, but, check out parts of Franklin Park, check out Olmsted Park, check out the Fenway, to really try and keep everyone safe. So that has been really great. And those calls continue. Now it's on a monthly basis, and it's been really great to partner even more closely, at this time, and I think has been very helpful for a lot of us. Here are some of the things we've been doing in terms of our virtual programs. We used to have in-person tours. We've had a couple, but we've been trying to be really, really safe. But so these are the kinds of things we've tried to do. We know that a lot of people feel like they can be outside. Some people perhaps have felt like they couldn't. So what could we do for people so they could do things with their families outdoors? But what could they do, also at home potentially? So one of my amazing staff members came up with this project to create a coloring book for the kids about digging in the muddy river. There's a big restoration project going on right now where the Army Corps is dealing with a lot of the sediment that has accumulated in the river for a long time, and it caused some flooding. And so there's, big diggers out in the park, and it's really fun for the kids to watch. So we try to notify people about where the best viewing area, I think we call it stroller parking, sort of viewing areas where you could check that out. Bingo, other kinds of things like, that people could do with their friends, families, and, keep active at this time. And you see on the right side here, a shot of our, virtual tour guide. So this is something that we launched, and it's been pretty great to continue to use and update during, these kinds of times when we want to add special information to people about where to go or how to use the parks. And I think that tool's been really great. And I think that's going to become something that, I think all park systems are going to, want to use in the future. You don't always want to have big signs, and the park signs are great. Sometimes that can be distracting to the park experience. So if there can be those things on a phone, that's good too. We also are pretty cognizant that not everyone has phones. So we have to, kind of do both. At our visitor center, we used to have, maps and things available in the visitor center. After some of the early kind of concerns and uncertainty about, how coronavirus is spread calmed down a little bit, or we got more information, essentially, we now have put out a plastic dispenser with maps outside our locked visitor center so that people can pick up maps if they don't, have that on their phone. So we've tried to, do what we can to, provide different options for different people. And the maps are going like hotcakes. We have to refill it pretty regularly. Here, are just some of the projects that we do that are, not related to sort of the momentary crisis that we're in with the pandemic. These are the kinds of long-term work that we do to steward the park. We have a program called the Olmsted Tree Society that I'm very proud of. I've done tree work in 2 other cities, but this is the first place where a private organization raises private dollars to match dollar for dollar every dollar that the public sector spends on trees. So we have a database. I'll talk a little bit more about that, of all of the trees in the Emerald Necklace, and we match their work and fund tree work directly and sort of do the work that makes most sense for us, and they do the work that makes most sense for them. The Muddy River restoration, which is the project that's going on right now with the Army Corps of Engineers. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Charles Gate revitalization, and there's a lot of other projects we do with our youth and volunteers and visitors. So again, the Olmsted Tree Society program has been around since 2014, and really got rolling in 2015. And we have a database of all of the trees in the Emerald Necklace over a certain size. Once we know they're going to survive, and we track their health, we track their care. And when we started this, many of the trees hadn't been taken care of or inspected in a long time. And now I'm really proud to say that at the end of this year, all the trees in the inventory would have already received 1 round of care. So now we've brought sort of the entire Emerald Necklace urban forest up to a certain basic level of care with pruning, watering, soil work. I mean, there's definitely still trees that need assistance, but we've really invested a lot to make sure that these trees have gotten as much as we can give them. And it's been a really wonderful partnership. We know that we've inspired more support on the public side, but also really organized ourselves because we have this database, and it's the only database that has been created by arborists for trees in the city in a systematic way over the area that we cover. We were able to, for example, when we heard about the emerald ash borer, we were able to, in 5 seconds go, okay, well, where are ash trees, print out a report, and then go around and inspect them and decide how we were going to address that when there was this new pest. So it's paying dividends that, we hadn't, necessarily even foreseen. Here's an example of, one of the maps as we are sort of looking at, where certain trees, would be inside or outside the project area, how they might be affected by the work. These maps have been able to be used to communicate lots of things. And so it's been a very helpful thing for lots of partners. I'm also very excited that now, all of the work is being done digitally, so saving a lot of staff time, no transcription from a contractor's notes. We're doing that right now, real time, digitally. This is the Muddy River restoration. So the Emerald Necklace Conservancy was founded in 1996 because there was a huge flood, because there hadn't been a lot of care taken to maintain the flood capacity of the river. And so there was an enormous flood. It shut down the T, which is the public transportation here in Boston. It flooded one of the stations in 16 feet of water, caused many, many millions of dollars in damage, flooded the basement of the Museum of Fine Arts, which is where they put art. So it's bad. Anyway, so the, that was when essentially the Conservancy realized that, there needed to be a conservancy, when all the community partners and the institutions came together. So we really need to have someone to look out for the health of the Emerald Necklace as a whole. It can't just be sort of in the hands of individual advocates or individual departments, because it really is a system. And so that's how we started. And through the advocacy of the Conservancy and others, a portion of a park that had been turned into a parking lot has reverted back to a park and an open river. So that piece has been daylit. That's the expression for that. And then the rest of the Emerald Necklace is getting work with the Army Corps project going on right now, dredging and restoration of some areas. It's not everything we would have liked, but we are. It's a huge investment, and I think we will be given the opportunity to build on it. Here's some pictures of the work ongoing, and some of the maps we tried to make just to sort of basically explain what's happening, and then if people are interested, provide a QR code to learn more. So to sort of show people where the work is happening. We were a little concerned that people might see the sign and think the park is closed. So, you know, the Army Corps and has made a really conscious effort to keep pathways open, and so you can continue to walk around the park. And we wanted to really continue to keep people in the loop. So I wanted to talk a little bit about one of the big projects that the Conservancy is undertaking with some wonderful community partners. The Charles Gate is a section of the park that is a little less known. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the history of this site. I'm going to do a time check. All right. So I'm going to spend a few more minutes and then questions. This is a historic map of the Emerald Necklace. This is the first piece of the Emerald Necklace that was built. So here's the Charles River, which runs through Boston, and it runs along Boston. I suppose that other side is, you know, Cambridge. So we have here what was along the edge of the Charles, what was the kind of early predecessor to the Esplanade, and then Commonwealth Mall, which starts in the Public Garden and the Boston Common, America's first park. And it comes down and then connects at this point. And this is where Frederick Law Olmsted sort of took that very rectilinear park design from that you know had been around for centuries, and sort of made the transition to more of an organic and curvilinear system. And this section of the Emerald Necklace has been highly compromised. Put a highway on top of it, on one end of it, and on the other end of it. So it's not like it was before. This is what it looked like in Olmsted's day and shortly thereafter. You know, the Hotel Braymore was where apparently where the Beatles stayed when they were in Boston. This area was amazing. I mean, it's still a wonderful area, but the park itself has been really, really changed through essentially things that we built to accommodate automobiles. Prepare yourselves for the next slide. This is today. So what has happened is Stora Drive was built along the water, and a tremendous amount of the park was filled, and parts of the river, new parts of the river have been put into pipes, which rivers don't particularly like. There is a tremendous amount of pollution, and the water is not being well cared for. So, you know, this is Charles Gate today, and this is a piece of the park that I've been very focused on with these wonderful community members, and we have developed a design. So my background is an architect and city planner, and I think there's both short-term fixes that we've been able to do, like fixing fences and dealing with lights and other pieces of the park. There's also long-term things. This park really needs to be brought back into, you know, being a park. So here you see how the new connections that we want to bring in would reconnect some of these broken pieces. Right now, you cannot. This piece of the Emerald Necklace is right at the end. It sort of connects the Back Bay Fens with the Esplanade. You cannot walk from one end to the other in a crosswalk. There aren't even crosswalks, surprisingly enough, to bring you through this center block of the Commonwealth Mall. And it's really quite you know, frustrating, and really doesn't really say that as a pedestrian or a park user, you're very important. And I know a lot of people do actually want to provide these things. So we were really excited. We received support from you know, private donors, but also the city and the state to get a design of how this area could work. And we've been very lucky to work with a group called Landing Studio that has helped us make these recommendations. So we're going to be able to connect with people-powered transportation tools like biking and pedestrian. Deb, I hope when you come back, you get to bike the whole route. Um,
Thank you.
yes, and run perhaps too, and improve the ecology of the Muddy River and the Charles. So this is a big project that we're working on right now. This is the current state. You know, we got the highway above us, but we're trying to activate this space with new uses like a dog park and other things. Here's an example of the bridge at the end of this is the original old bridge that was the end of the park that Olmsted designed. It's still here. Isn't that amazing that it's still here? And then they just sort of filled in more, and then they plunked Stora Drive on the end. And there's a real opportunity to open this up. So this is sort of the future vision. And then I'm gonna like one more image, and then I'll turn it over to questions. This right now is, you know, again, that's where Boston used to end. And this green kind of not very healthy patch of grass would have been water. That was the Charles. And now we have the opportunity to open it up again. So there's some exciting things happening there, and we're partnering and in long, important, productive conversations with Mass DOT and other public agencies to do this. So it's really a fun project. Oh, I would be remiss if I didn't tell you, if any of you are going to be in Boston or in Boston from, you know, starting, this is a little sneak preview. It's just getting released in the press in the next couple of days. We are going to be lighting up the Emerald Necklace bridges and like a little green necklace, so you can visit them. We're trying to brighten everyone's world a little bit during these continuing dark indoor days of what we're dealing with the public challenges we have right now with COVID and other things. So I hope people can visit. There's lots of ways to follow us on social media and other ways. And I should stop talking so there's time for questions. I could go on forever. Thank you so much for having me. And, you know, Deb, you know, where would you like to start?
Well, first of all, thank you. What a fabulous presentation. And I can imagine that everyone is like me, all these new things, how exciting. You know, I can't wait to take advantage of them. And I guess I want to start just by congratulating you. What an amazing project. And, you know, this vision is really creates quality of life for people across Boston, across Brookline. And we know it really matters. You know, one of the things that the Nature Conservancy is looking really hard at right now is the nexus between health and nature. And we know that with access to nature, we're healthier, we're more resilient, you know, we're less likely to get ill, we're in better shape, and both mentally and physically. And so thank you so much for your contributions to this. We've gotten a whole bunch of questions, and maybe why don't we get out of the screen share and then we can see side to side, because
Sure.
you know, I'm psyched to have a conversation with you. And I guess first off, and I would bet lots of people are thinking this, but maybe they didn't ask this yet, which is, so what's your favorite spot?
In the Emerald Necklace?
Yes. And so two questions. And the other is, are there any secret places, hidden gems that we know about?
Well, there is, and we actually have a tour of hidden gems on our guide, because there really are. Well, there's a lot of lovely places. I think Ward's Pond is pretty wonderful. At Olmsted Park, I definitely do think I tend towards the sort of areas that are full of trees and a little bit more overgrown. So Ward's Pond is pretty great. Ellicott Arch in Franklin Park is a really lovely arch. I don't know if you've seen that. It's one of the ones that's lighting up, and it's, you know, Olmsted worked with a Roxbury pudding stone, which is this very kind of large, kind of rough stone that is a wonderful hard stone actually, and it looks very rusticated, and it, you know, he really had a sense of nature and people feeling like they were part of it, as opposed to, you know, inside something that was really touched by man. And so I think that's a nice spot.
I have to say, it's still magic. Like, one of the magic pieces to me of the Emerald Necklace is you've got some parks that are really designed, but a lot of it is just feels like being in nature. And that is really phenomenal for being in the middle of the city. So I forgot to mention again that for folks who've got questions, please put it in the Q&A box. We've gotten a bunch of questions about, are we going to get this presentation and the links? And yes, next week that we'll send everyone an email. It'll have the video. You should feel free to share it with friends. And it'll also include all of the items referenced in the presentation. So if you didn't write it down, it's coming into your inbox. So don't worry about that. And yeah, I think you've got a really interesting background. You bring such incredible experience as somebody who's got the architecture, but also experience in thinking about public spaces. So how did you get to Boston? Like, what drew you here from California? I guess you were in California and New York, and now here you are in Boston.
Yes. So, and I'm sorry about the dings. I can't figure out how to turn them off.
You ignore them. We're going to ignore them too, right, everybody? We'll just ignore them.
The end of my technical expertise.
Don't be distracted. You're doing just fine.
Sorry. So let's see. So I went to college in New York. So that's how I got there. And I got, I couldn't decide if I wanted to go into architecture or city planning. And I thought, well, if I go work for the Parks Department, I'll figure it out. But then I couldn't decide. So I got 2 master's degrees because I couldn't decide.
Overachiever.
I know, it's a personal failing. Anyway, so then I went to grad school on the West Coast, and then didn't think I was going to work in parks all my life, but the San Francisco Parks Department needed someone to help with this capital plan, and it was really exciting. And so I got to do that, and I was there for many years. And then I thought about, maybe my family's on the East Coast, and I did actually miss the trees out here. They're different. And, yes. It's weird. You don't think that stuff is embedded, but I think it kind of is. And the seasons, I missed the seasons. Don't tell people in San Francisco.
We hear that a lot when people come back to us. It's because of fall. It's because
it is kind of nice. So and it was just really exciting to have this opportunity. The Conservancy was looking for a new president, and it was really, really wonderful to, again, this is like the Parthenon of parks. I mean, when you open any landscape textbook all over the world, this is in the first chapter. And I don't think a lot of folks here always understand that. When you live down the street from the Parthenon, do you think, oh, I live down the street from the Parthenon? You probably go, oh gosh, when's the cafe gonna open? You just don't think about it. So I think that it's taken for granted a little bit, but I also think people do really love their parks here. They love, and these are our parks. These are everyone's parks. These are public parks. So I really love the idea of being able to make them more relevant, invite people in. I mean, one of the things we've been talking a lot about is, how do you create a sense of welcome? I think, there's a lot of hard thinking we need to do about that right now, about how can parks be truly for everyone, and everyone know that they are theirs, and they are safe, and they are welcome. And this is something that I think a lot of cities are need to grapple
with. Yeah, I recall, I was around working in public policy when the Americans with Disabilities Act came into play, and that was radical. The idea that if this is a public benefit, it should be available to people in wheelchairs, and that of course then helps mothers or fathers with strollers, right? It helps people who need a little help walking. It opened it in such a transformative way, and we need to do that again when we think about diversity and equity, inclusion, and of course justice. How do we make sure everyone, now that we know it really is linked to health, how do we make sure everyone stays healthy? And I know at the Nature Conservancy, we're deep in conversation about this. How do we open the door? So listen, we've got so many questions. I feel like I need to get to some of them. There was a really interesting question. I thought hearing about how the flood led to the Conservancy, like thinking about the Emerald Necklace as a single system. I mean, that's really important. You know, that's again what the Nature Conservancy does, right? We think at the scale of science, and that doesn't end at the, you know, in geographic boundaries. And the interesting question is, what started the Emerald Necklace in the first place? Was it a flood? Was it, what got Olmsted to really think about this?
What got, well, that's a great story. Okay, so in the 1880s, cities all over the country, Boston wasn't special, was having trouble dealing with sewage. You know, there weren't those sort of modern systems.
Yeah.
And if any of you can come to our visitor center, we might even be able to email it to you. Boston's, you know, there's an odor map that they made.
An odor map.
Odor map. It's fantastic. It's literally, I'm a big map person, as you can tell, but it's like one of my favorite maps, because there were areas that you would want to avoid in low tide. The Charles was still tidal, and there was, you know, Boston, like a lot of cities, filled in and didn't necessarily figure out a way to manage stormwater and, you know, and sanitary sewage. And so Olmsted was really, it was brought in to solve an engineering problem. And I joke that it's a water park that is like dressed up as a park, or it's actually like a sewage management system dressed up like a park, which now we're all kind of going, oh, that's what parks are. I mean, Olmsted got this from the start. It's like amazing. And so that's why it was built. And when you see that odor map, you're like, oh, makes sense. But because that would be pretty terrible. And you know, a lot of cities then, you know, adopted some of those things. I mean, he had conversations with engineers like, sure, we can make a really big pipe, but wouldn't it be better and easier to maybe take care of if we made it a park? And I think, you know, he was a really good communicator. He convinced people. He was tough to argue with. I mean, he got Brookline and Boston to like change
to talk to each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
So really, he's the grandfather of green infrastructure. So it's something we talk about all the time. How do we deploy natural systems, restore natural systems, or protect natural systems so they continue to provide the ecological services that can replace our hardened infrastructure? Isn't it nicer, so much nicer, to have a park than bigger culverts or cement and, you know,
bigger culverts? No, exactly. It's true. And culverts fail, you know.
Right. They fail. And, you know, and nature provides so many other benefits. So I love it. So there was a question, is there a plan to finish the part of the Emerald Necklace that was not completed during Olmsted's time, from Franklin Park to Moakley Park in South Boston?
You've got a great group of people.
I know people really know.
Oh, so great. Yes, so much to talk about. Yes, the city, it has actually put money towards trying to plan and figure out how to best make the parkway of Columbia Road, or to green that connection. So it's a really hard gray, not green connector right now. Carries a lot of traffic. It's this major thoroughfare. Olmsted, you know, the person asked the question knows this, but maybe not everyone. So Olmsted actually did envision a connection from Columbia Road, a green connection from Columbia Road to what is now Moakley Park. I've heard people say salt to salt because, you know, it was like a link, and that piece was never realized. I think that it's complicated today, right? Because it's a well-used road. It has, you know, lots of things it must serve. It has, you know, important active communities and schools. And so if you change a road, you need to think about how to do that. But there is a plan that the city is working on, and we are very excited to partner with them at when that starts. And it, you know, needs to be done very thoughtfully, because, you know, we know that a lot of times when these kinds of projects are taken on, there could be challenges with displacement, and, you know, how do you improve an area and not, you know, like lose the community that was there that you were improving the neighborhood for, you know?
Right,
so
right. Yeah, that is, every city has been grappling with this idea of how do we make changes that are that we can involve the community in making decisions about. So it's not done to them with unintended consequences that are actually end up being more harmful than helpful. So yeah, I respect that you're thinking that way. There's a similar question. How does the Southwest Corridor Park fit into the Emerald Necklace system? Is it the eighth park in the Emerald Necklace, or is it not considered part of the Emerald Necklace system at all?
Well, this is also a great question. The Southwest Corridor, this questioner knows this story, but for those who don't, the Southwest Corridor is a park that was born through the activism of people saying, no, we don't want another freeway. We need something else. So a trench was sort of, driven through Boston, and houses and communities were destroyed to make way for a freeway. And then in the last, literally the 19th hour or whatever, the governor said, okay, this will not be a freeway, after lots of amazing community members rose up. So it runs in a linear fashion, not that far from the Emerald Necklace. It's more of a straight line, and it is a series of parks. And it has other amenities, and it has a subway line that is now below the park in most areas. So it is not officially part of the Emerald Necklace, but I do think a lot about networks. And we've been working more and more closely, actually over the last year, with a lot of the stewards that steward, and it's also DCR, so it's the same. And so actually and the city has a plan called Green Connectors, and we're working to connect and make green corridor connections, between the Southwest Corridor and the Emerald Necklace, because it should be part of a network, And there is a lovely place where they meet right now at Forest Hills. And Deb, if you do come out again, you've got to check it out. There is the smallest, cutest little roundabout for bicycles you've ever seen. It's just fantastic. And there's a new subway entrance, a T entrance. It's a lovely moment. And actually it completed right at the beginning of the pandemic, because I've been wanting to have a big event, invite everyone, like, let's celebrate this moment where the Southwest Corridor and the Emerald Necklace meets. And they haven't planned an opening. I don't know, but it is open. At some point, we're going to have a party. We have to have a party.
Well, actually, on that party question, there was a question: how is the Emerald Necklace Conservancy planning to celebrate Olmsted 2022?
Yes. Oh, such good question. So we are. So Olmsted 2022. If he was still alive today, he would be 200 in 2022. So wow. It's a great moment to celebrate. And as you mentioned, Deb, he is sort of the grandfather of green infrastructure, and this is the first example of that. So how should we do that best? We've thought a lot about this, and there is a national celebration afoot. So there is an Olmsted 200 planning process that I've been very involved with, but I'm really trying to help people understand more about Olmsted's legacy in Boston. But also, I think it's really important to, so what we have a project that a concept that we're working on right now called Olmsted Now. And because we know that some people will come to us through Olmsted, but most people are just going to come to us because it's their park,
right.
And so how do we connect people more with their park and bring people more into using and feeling welcome in their park? I think that's a lot of what we are focusing right now. We've been working with a lot of partners in the Boston area whose legacies are also connected to Olmsted. Like the first landscape architecture program was started at Harvard because Olmsted's firm was here. This is the first firm. This is where his home and office was in Brookline, which you probably also biked by. So we are talking with a lot of folks to say, how can we partner and make this sort of a conversation across quite a few levels? It shouldn't just be about the Emerald Necklace or the Emerald Necklace Conservancy. How can this be about connecting people with their parks? Olmsted said that parks were a place where people could come together and be seen coming together. They were supposed to be a unifier. It was really important. That was a really important part of what he did. So how do we bring that to the fore and do that? And I think instead of one instinct I have is, okay, let's improve 6 things. And I actually don't think it's about that. I think it's about empowering community members to do and be in their parks as they would like to be. And how can I work with many around Boston that perhaps are not already in our world, and raise them up and make them and help them, realize their vision for what they want in a park.
So the idea is to elevate his vision and celebrate it today. Like, what does his vision mean today? And it means bringing more people into the circle and making this available to more people. I love that idea. Really exciting. And maybe we can work on something
Oh,
together.
that would be so
That
great.
would be really fun. So we have a question. How has climate change impacted the Emerald Necklace? This person's thinking of sea level rise, flooding, storm damage to trees. Obviously, emerald ash borer, we're planning, you talked a little bit about planning for the new pests that are coming through because of climate change.
Well, I mean, yeah, there's some really specific ways that it's in basic sense that we're thinking a lot about, how climate, what our tree selection should be, the future tree plantings. Should we be planting different types of trees that would survive better in a different type of climate? We're spending more on tree watering than we used to, and just trying to keep our little trees to sort of make it to the next phase in their life. The Muddy River project is related a lot to that need to be able to respond and handle quick, heavy storm events. That entire project, was important no matter what, but it's made even more important with climate change. And we're definitely noticing different types of invasives that are here, that are also assisted by sort of the changes we're seeing in climate. I also think that there was a really interesting study that came out this year where the city of Boston, I think, really thoughtfully evaluated its tree canopy about 5 years ago to today to sort of just see how they were. And what they were noticing is that we're at about the same point that we were, which is good, right? We're not dropping, but the increase in tree canopy was primarily on public property, streets, public parks, and the loss was being mainly experienced on private property, houses, development, or people taking down trees either on their property or whatever. So it tells us that, the Emerald Necklace and these big, public trees that we are stewarding are really important, especially when you deal with the concepts, the issues of heat islands, and perhaps there are ways that, our stewardship practices can be expanded or can serve as models for different areas, because climate change is meaning that some neighborhoods in Boston are getting even hotter.
Yeah. We are starting to run out of time. I think I've got time for just a couple more questions, and I apologize to everyone. We have so many questions in the Q&A box. We couldn't get to everything. There's some very specific questions, and maybe they can get answered offline. There were a few questions about plants and animals. How do native plants figure in the overall plan for the Emerald Necklace? And can you talk more about wildlife in the Emerald Necklace? And I've cheated by bundling those together.
Okay, so yeah, I'll start with the. So we think a lot about planting and planting. Essentially trying to control invasives. I'm not sure if we can ever totally win, but we can try and control invasives and plant back strong, strong competitors, native competitors, if we can find the ones that can prevail, and try and protect and cultivate those. We do mainly work with a native palette. Olmsted wasn't exclusively a native.
That was those days, right?
Yes. So we have a lot of, I will call them robust discussions about what we should do. And, I'd say for the most part, we use, a native palette, and I'm really happy to say that at times the bureaucracy and the steps take a long time, but there are a lot of people looking out for the park. We have a landmarks commission that cares. We have a conservation commission that cares, that reviews what types of plantings we do. Boston's blessed by people that really care and expertise. So, it helps us. And we often have conversations, what's best for climate change, what's native, what was historic. and what was historic, or what did the superintendent actually plant that Olmsted didn't like? I mean, there's times when you find out that what he drew wasn't actually what was planted. And then, so, then you go debate, okay, well, which is historic, but it's good fun. And it's lovely to be able to have, it's a blessing to be able to have these conversations anyway.
Well, and it's like that debate in the Supreme Court. Do we literally follow the Constitution, or do we, see what actually got written and happened, and what did the founders want? It's the same idea. It's like,
but I don't want to skip the wildlife question. I think that's a really great question. We have wildlife that we would like to see more of, the bees and the pollinators, and we do plant a lot of times native flowers to try and there's a meadow that we've been working on to try and support those things. But there also are challenges, in terms of wildlife. We have a lot of geese, and we recently received, the Muddy River. It's really important to protect the water quality of the Muddy River. And we have recently received the dubious honor of being the biggest polluter to the Charles, and
because of geese.
Based on E. coli levels. Now, I do not know if the E. coli is human or geese or dog or some other critter. And I'm looking into, I have been thinking about doing DNA testing on the E. coli, which you did, CSI.
Well, it makes sense because it'll help you figure out where the solution is. There was a good question, though, that links to this. There was a question about whether you're planning to create a riparian buffer for the Muddy River, and as well as tying it to a program of maintenance so that folks don't inadvertently mow down the green, because we know that is one way to keep the E. coli from getting into the rivers. If you've got vegetation, it stops the flow.
Yeah, try and catch it. Yeah, the irony is, right, the things that plants like is the stuff the water doesn't. So we could just bring these two systems together. Oh wait, they're right beside each other. Exactly. Right. No, exactly. There's a way we can do this. So at Charles Gate, that is the goal. I mean, that is the plan. Right now we have these steep banks. It's like the Seine, just paved, and we are going to be planting the banks, and we are trying to reintroduce that vegetated edge that can treat the water before it hits our system and feed the plants. It's beautiful. Why don't we just build it back?
That is right. So look, we are out of time. This has been such a fun conversation. I just want to thank you so much for being with us. Do you have any final thoughts before I do our conclusion? Anything else you'd like to share with folks?
I just want to say thank you for everyone that is listening and interested to follow the Emerald Necklace and the Emerald Necklace Conservancy. We do have a visitor center. I hope if any of you are able to come, you can read all about the parks on our mobile tour guide, and read about the history, because I can tell you're all into it. So please.
What a great audience.
Yeah. My mother read it from Atlanta. She read, and I was like, this is great. This is what you can do these days. And visit us if you're in Boston.
Great. Well, thank
also
you.
Brookline.
And Brookline. Yes, let's not forget about Brookline. So I just want to thank everyone for joining us today. And thank you so much, Karen, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you also to everyone who tuned in for your support of the Nature Conservancy. It's your support that makes all of this work possible. And as I mentioned earlier, we'll be sending everyone a follow-up email with links to the resources we talked about today and a recording of this webinar. You should feel free to share them with your friends. You can also follow us on social media at conserve_MA on Facebook and Instagram. That's a way you can keep up with our work and get updates on upcoming virtual opportunities to connect. Please join us on February 18th at noon for a discussion about the Massachusetts Climate Bill with TNC's Massachusetts Director of Government Relations, Steve Long, and Eugenia Gibbons, the Boston Director of Climate Policy at Healthcare Without Harm. And as always, you can find the latest webinar schedule and register at nature.org/MA webinars. And thank you again for joining us, and have a really great afternoon. You've been a great audience, and thank you so much for your wonderful, wonderful talk today. Have a great one.